السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله النبي الأمي وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه. ثم أما بعد، أسعد الله أوقاتكم ونور قلوبكم بعين الإيمان والإسلام والإحسان، وتقبل الله منا ومنكم طاعتنا في هذا الشهر المبارك، الشهر الكريم، شهر رمضان، إنه ولي ذلك والقادر عليه. May Allah bless you all. Alhamdulillah, we are well into Ramadan and fastly approaching the middle of Ramadan, and we'll be looking at the 13th juz, or the 13th part of the Quran in this session, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And this 13th juz of the Quran spans several surah of the Quran. After Surah Yusuf, we will find that the surahs are getting much shorter, and so we're looking at in the 13th juz, we have Surah Al-Ra'd and Surah Ibrahim, and also Surah Yusuf that begins in the middle of, or the transition between the 12th and the 13th juz. So I'm going to be looking only at Surah Yusuf for this session, alayhi salam. And though the juz begins somewhere in the middle of Surah Yusuf, I just want to give kind of the background. Surah Yusuf is unique in that it is the only surah in the Quran that talks or speaks specifically about one prophet from the beginning towards the end. And there are a lot of ibar, a lot of lessons in the story of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. It's said that he obviously is from the ulama of Bani Israel. He is the son of Yaqub, who is the son of Ishaq, who is the son of Ibrahim. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned him as being Al-Kareem, Ibn Al-Kareem, Ibn Al-Kareem, Ibn Al-Kareem. So the Kareem, the kind, the generous, the son of the kind and generous, the son of kind and generous, son of kind and generous. So that noble lineage of Ibrahim, and then Ishaq, and then Yaqub, and then Yusuf alayhi salam. And he had 11 other brothers, 10 of whom were not from the same mother. At least according to Surah Yusuf, it can be inferred that the only brother that he had from the same mother and obviously same father was Benjamin, or Benjamin, his younger brother. So the surah opens up with قوله تعالى, even though it's in the 12th juz. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alif Lam Ra. تلك آيات الكتاب المبين. إنا أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين. So this is addressed to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Alif Lam Ra, as we know, those particular letters have their meaning with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the verses, تلك آيات الكتاب المبين, of the clear book, the Quran. إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا. We have made it an Arabic Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you may understand it and may interpret it. And we know that the Arabic language is very rich, and we say that the Quran يَحْتَمُلُ الْأَوْجُهِ, that even one or two or even three or more interpretations can be found in the same verse, and all of them can be true. And this is what Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam radiallahu anhu referred to when he said that the Quran has a had, and has a zahir, and has a batin, and has muttala or matla, different way to say it. That it has a clear definition, it has a zahir, clear meaning, it has a batin, and has a more esoteric meaning, and also it is a point of embarking. So people read the Quran, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can make many beautiful things happen in your relationship, interaction with the Quran al-Kareem. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن. So here, speaking to the Prophet ﷺ directly, we will tell you the most beautiful of stories, بما أوحينا, that which we have revealed to you in the Quran. وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين, and even though before you did not know them. So this is a dalil, or an evidence that the Prophet ﷺ had no knowledge of any of these stories, about any of these prophets beforehand, and this came from the wahi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then here the beginning of the story of Yusuf, ayah 4. إذ قال يوسف لأبيه يا أبت إني رأيت أحد عشر كوكبا إني رأيت 11 كوكبا والشمس والقمر رأيتهم لي ساجدين قال يا بني لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك فيكيدوا لك كيدا إن الشيطان للإنسان عدو مبين وكذلك يجتبيك ربك ويعلمك من تأويل الأحاديث ويتم نعمته عليك وعلى آل يعقوب كما أتمها على أبويك من قبل إبراهيم وإسحاق إن ربك عليم حكيم لقد كان في يوسف وإخوته آيات للسائلين. So this is kind of the preamble to the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, where إذ قال يوسف لأبيه, Yusuf said to his father Yaqub, يا أبتي, oh my father, إني رأيت 11 كوكبا, I found 10 or 12 planets or planetary bodies, 10 planetary bodies, and the sun and the moon making prostration to me. In the Sharia of Yaqub alayhi salam, prostrating from one person to the next wasn't a sign of ibadah or of worship, but was a sign of tahiyya, yani a way of greeting, like shaking hands, but obviously for someone that you held in high esteem and high respect. So it wasn't like a sujood, prostration of ibadah, as we'll see at the end of Surah Yusuf, inshallah. So he sees this in his dream. And then Yaqub alayhi salam instructs him not to tell his brothers about it, his older brothers. So he was like number 11. And then the younger than him was Benjamin. فَيَكِيدُ لَكَ كَيْدًا. So Yaqub alayhi salam had a feeling that the brothers were something in their heart for Sayyidina Yusuf. And this is actually true. إذ قالوا ليوسف وأخوه أحب إلى أبينا منا ونحن عصبة إن أبانا لفي ضلال مبين. As they said to themselves, Yusuf and his brother, right? Because they're from the same mother, so they didn't share a mother, but they share the father. أحب إلى أبينا, they are more beloved to our father than us. ونحن عصبة, right? We are عصبة. We are people who we're older, and we can bring benefit. They lived a very kind of agrarian life. They had camels, they had sheep, they had to raise their own crops and so forth. So Sayyidina Yaqub was in need of having strong men around him, and those strong men were the other 10 sons of his. So they said, نحن عصبة إن أبانا لفي ضلال مبين. How could he have more love for these young boys than for us? And we're the ones who are bringing him benefit. And then I'm not going to read the rest of what happened, but they conspired and they said either we kill him or put him in the well. And then one of them, who was at least more compassionate than the rest, said, no, let's put him in the well and then leave him there. And then we'll just go back and say that the wolf ate him. وَجَاءُوا بِدَمٍ كَذِبٍ. Right? They had some sort of blood that wasn't the blood of Yusuf on the shirt, to say that the wolf had eaten Yusuf alayhi salam. And the Prophet Yaqub did not believe them. And he still had hoped that someday he would be reunited with Yusuf alayhi salam. In the meantime, Yusuf was left in the well, and then he was picked up by the sayyara, which are a group of people passing through using the well, and they found the young boy in the well. They bring him up, they bring him to Egypt, and in Egypt he is then sold off, and he is bought by Al-Aziz and his wife, who were kind of like the provincial rulers for the king at the time of Egypt. So Egypt at the time didn't have pharaohs per se, but they had another system run by kings. And this was 400 years or so before Musa alayhi salam, before the pharaoh of Moses, wallahu a'lam. And so then he is brought to Imra'at al-Aziz and the Aziz, and he grows up in their household. And Imra'at al-Aziz, who's also known as Zulaykha in some of the riwayat, her name, she found Yusuf to be very beautiful, and it said that Yusuf was a very handsome young man, alayhi salam. And our ulama say that even as handsome as Yusuf was, alayhi salam, and that he was given shatr al-jamal, half of all beauty, then our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam u'tiya kullu al-jamal, then all of beauty is for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he was just as beautiful, if not more so. Then your question might be, well, if that's true, then how come people didn't have the same way of interacting and reacting to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as some of these people did with Yusuf alayhi salam? And the answer to that is the Prophet ﷺ was in some sense veiled. No one really saw the true nature. And in fact, the Sahaba couldn't look directly at him. And it said that when he walked along, you couldn't tell the difference between him and the horizon from the sunlight, because they were both light. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't cast a shadow. So he was all nur, he was all light. And so as a mercy to the companions, as a mercy to the ummah, we don't actually get to see, or they didn't actually get to see the Prophet ﷺ as he truly was. So nonetheless, راودته عن نفسها, she tried to make advances towards him, and it was sexual nature. And he refused. هي غلقت الأبواب, she had him in a room, she closed all the doors, and he ran away to get away from her, and then she grabbed his shirt and it ripped from behind. And at that point, سيدها لدى الباب, right, as the Quran says. Then Al-Aziz himself was there at the door, and he saw what was happening. But they didn't know what had happened. So it said that someone min ahliha, someone from her family, then said, let's do the following. Let's look at the shirt. If it was ripped from the front, then that means he was the one who was advancing, and he is the wrongdoer. And if it's ripped from the back, that means he was running away from her, and that she is the wrongdoer. And there's a riwayah, Ibn Juz'ay mentions in the tafsir, that this person who spoke from the family of Imrat al-Aziz, the wife of al-Aziz, was actually a baby in the cradle. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala antaqahu. Antaqahu means he spoke while he's still a baby. Much in the same way that Isa alayhi salam spoke. And much in the same way that the baby of Jurayj, who was the worshipper and the one, this is recounted in Bukhari, and then his mother called him, he did not answer because he was worshiping, and then she said, may he not die until the mumisat, that someone of a prostitute does some harm to him. And then the harm was done to him, and they accused him of being the father of the baby, when it was not the father. He was not the father, it was the ra'i, it was the shepherd. And then the baby spoke and stated that it was a shepherd. Anyway, that is anyway, Allahu a'lam. The surah itself doesn't say exactly who spoke, but nevertheless, that's what happened. And Yusuf was instructed by Al-Aziz to أعرض عن هذا, يعني don't humiliate us, don't bring this out. And then he told his wife, استغفري من ذنبك, right, and see forgiveness from the sin that you made. However, the story didn't end there with this particular incident. It was then that there were some women in the city that then started speaking about Zulaykha in this negative way. And they said that شَغَفَهَا حُبَّا, that she's looking for her servant boy. And so it was very scandalous the way that they spoke about her. So then she prepared a plan so as to kind of make them understand how difficult a situation she found herself in. So she invited them over for lunch, or they were preparing the food and they had knives. And then she asked Yusuf, أخرج عليهن. He came out and they were so mesmerized and dazzled by his beauty, قطعن أيديهن, that they cut their hands because they were too enamored and busy. And then at that point, with this incident, then Yusuf alayhi salam was put into prison by Al-Aziz and his wife. And then he meets two people in prison, and he sees dreams about them and interprets their dreams. One of them who was going to be taken out of prison, but then crucified, and the birds would be eating from his head, unfortunately. Then the other person who was going to be saved would be a servant for someone else serving them wine. And he told that person, let them know that I am in here wrongly, that I've been wronged and I've been put in this prison. But he forgot, as the Quran said. فَلَبِثَ فِي السِّجْنِ بِضْعَ سِنِينَ. So then the Prophet Yusuf ﷺ then stayed a few more years. The total time of incarceration, Allahu a'lam, in prison, al-bid'a means something between 3 and 9, and then he had a period of that also similar. So it could have been anything from like 6 to 18 years, or 12 years, or 11. We don't actually know, Allahu a'lam. And then at that point, a message got to Yusuf that the king, who was not Al-Aziz, but the king was higher than him, had a dream about these 7 cows, that 7 would be full of milk and the 7 others would not be. And then another year something else happened. It won't go into all of it, but he interpreted that dream correctly. And then the king asked for Yusuf to be brought to him. and to see, well, who is this person and why is he in the prison? So we'll look at that from ayah 50, which is right at the beginning, or right before the beginning of the 13th juz. قوله تعالى وقال الملك ائتوني به فلما جاءه الرسول قال ارجع إلى ربك فاسأله ما بال النسوة اللاتي قطعن أيديهن إن ربي بكيدهن عليم. So he said to the messenger, in other words his servant person, to go get Yusuf and then ask about the women. So here, first they asked Yusuf, what are you doing in prison? And then he didn't mention anything about Al-Aziz or his wife, يعني للستر, to conceal and cover, and his ihsan towards them, because they did raise him in the household. But he mentioned about the women who cut their hands. So that's why the king asked about them and didn't ask about Imrat al-Aziz. فَاسْأَلْهُ مَا بَالُ النِّسْوَةِ اللَّاتِي قَطَّعْنَ أَيْدِيَهُنْ. That's what he had heard about, not the other story. إِنَّ رَبِّي بِكَيْدِهِنَّ عَلِيمٌ. Because my Lord is well acquainted with whatever plan that they had, if they plotted against him. And then he brings the 9 women, or he brings the women that were there, and he brings Al-Aziz, and he brings his wife. قال ما خطبكن إذ راوتن يوسف عن نفسه قلنا حاشا لله ما علمنا عليه من سوء قالت امرأة العزيز الآن الحصحص الحق أنا راودته عن نفسه وإنه لمن الصادقين. So then he asked them ما خطبكن إذ راوتن يوسف عن نفسه. What happened with Yusuf? Why did you plot against him? قلنا حاشا لله ما علمنا عليه من سوء. They said, oh, subhanallah, حاشا لله, how he was nothing wrong with him. We didn't plot against him, we have nothing against him. ما علمنا عليه من سوء. We don't know anything evil about him. And then Imrat al-Aziz sees this mawqif, sees the situation, and then she speaks up. قالت امرأة العزيز الآن حصحص الحق. Right? Now the truth has to be made clear and has to be elucidated and seen. حصحص الحق أنا راودته عن نفسي وإنه لمن الصادقين. I am the one who plotted against him. وإنه لمن الصادقين. And he is amongst the truthful ones. ذلك ليعلم أني لم أخنه بالغيب وأن الله لا يهدي كيد الخائنين وما أبرئ نفسي إن النفس لأمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي إن ربي غفور رحيم. So the Mufassirun are not in agreement about who said the next 2 things that are mentioned in these 2 verses. Was it Zulaykha, Imrat al-Aziz, or was it Yusuf? So what was said, ذلك ليعلم أني لم أخنه بالغيب وأن الله لا يهدي الكيد الخائنين. This is so that everyone will know that I did not betray him بالغيب, right? I did not betray him in the absence of my husband بالغيب, because nothing happened. وأن الله لا يهدي كيد الخائنين. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to guide the plot of the plotters or the machinations of those who plot. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي. And I cannot declare myself innocent. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. Because all of the nufus, the category of nafs, طبيعة النفس of the ego, لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ, is always inciting to evil. إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. Except that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon them. Except those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates to the other type of nufus. And there's 3 or 7 mentioned in the Quran. An-nafs al-lawwama, right? Surah al-Qiyamah, also an-nafs al-lawwama, which is the blaming nafs. So when it makes a mistake, it realizes it and it blames itself, and it also can do something good. And then we have an-nafs al-mutma'inna. Ya ayyatuha an-nafs al-mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya. فَادْخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي وَادْخُلِي جَنَّتِي. So an-nafs al-mutma'inna is considered to be the contented soul, the tranquil soul that has moved beyond the blameworthy approach or the reproachful approach of making mistakes, blaming, but has reached a higher maqam than this. That's an-nafs al-mutma'inna. So إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي, except for the nafs al-lawwama wa nafs al-mutma'inna. إِنَّ رَبِّي غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So that could have been also Zulaykha said that, making this i'tiraf. Or it could have been Sayyidina Yusuf said it when he says ذَلِكَ لِيَعْلَمَ أَنِّي لَمْ أَخُنْهُ بِالْغَيْبِ. In other words, I did not betray who was my master at the time, who was Al-Aziz, Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could also mean that. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْكَيْدَ الْخَائِنِينَ. And Allah does not guide the plotting of the plotters. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي. Here Yusuf alayhi salam speaking about himself. And I cannot declare myself innocent. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي إِنَّ رَبِّي غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So if Yusuf alayhi salam is one to say it, doesn't mean he committed a sin, because we believe all of the prophets are ma'sumun. They are infallible and cannot commit a sin. But he is stating the principle of the nafs to begin with. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي وَهَذَا تَوَاضُعٌ. This is humility from the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. Then the next verse, وَقَالَ الْمَلِكُ ائْتُونِي بِهِ أَسْتَخْلِصْهُ لِنَفْسِي فَلَمَّا كَلَّمَهُ قَالَ إِنَّكَ الْيَوْمَ لَدَيْنَا مَكِينٌ أَمِينٌ قَالَ اجْعَلْنِي عَلَى خَزَائِنِ الْأَرْضِ إِنِّي حَفِيظٌ عَلِيمٌ. So when the king saw this, he said, bring him to me, bring Yusuf to me. أَسْتَخْلِصْهُ لِنَفْسِي. Let me see exactly what's going on, and he could be someone that could benefit me, since he's an honest person and he knows how to interpret dreams. And that's someone that I want to be close to me to assume some responsibilities on behalf of the kingdom. فَلَمَّا كَلَّمَهُ. So when the king spoke to Yusuf, قَالَ إِنَّكَ الْيَوْمَ لَدَيْنَا مَكِينٌ أَمِينٌ. Today you are with us, makin, يعني نمكنك. You have, we want to give you authority and you are trustworthy. That's when Yusuf alayhi salam says, قَالَ اجْعَلْنِي عَلَى خَزَائِنِ الْأَرْضِ. Then make me the keeper over the khaza'in, the stores, basically the treasure. And back then it wasn't stores of gold and silver, it was stores of food. Egypt was the place. It was a fertile place. It had the Nile. People would come from far away to buy their grains and their food for the year, for example. This is what we're going to see later with the 10 brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam. So it appears it's not like he asked for a position of authority or a position of power, but rather he was offered one of them. Though some of the mufassirun, they said that this also is a dalil, indication that if one does not know the disposition of a person or the skills that they have, then it's okay to state them. So if you want to write your CV, but don't embellish it. Don't put something there that's actually not true. But you can put things that you believe to be true about yourself, and it's not boasting, but it's making people aware of the things that you have to offer, which is what we can say Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam happened here. And so then he was made the treasurer over these things. And then we see after that, a few verses later, that the brothers of Yusuf come all the way to Egypt many years later, after they had left him in the well, thinking that he had passed. And this is ayah number 58, قوله تعالى وَجَاء إِخْوَةُ يُوسُفَ فَدَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ فَعَرَفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. So the brothers of Yusuf came to him, فَعَرَفَهُمْ. He knew who they were, he recognized them, وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. But they didn't know who he was. Again, there's two possible interpretations here, or at least two. One, that because he got much older, he was not a young boy anymore, he was a man, and they didn't recognize him. Or that Yusuf alayhi salam actually was masked. He had something over his face, so they couldn't tell who he was. Wallahu a'lam. وَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجِهَازِهِمْ قَالَ ائْتُونِي بِأَخٍ لَكُمْ مِنْ أَبِيكُمْ أَلَا تَرَوْنَ أَنِّي أُوفِي الْكَيْلَ وَأَنَا خَيْرُ الْمُنْزِلِينَ فَإِنْ لَمْ تَأْتُونِ بِهِ فَلَا كَيْلَ لَكُمْ عِنْدِي وَلَا تَقْرَبُونَ قالوا سنراود عنه أباه وإنا لفاعلون وقال لفتيانه اجعلوا بضاعتهم في رحالهم لعلهم يعرفونها إذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم لعلهم يرجعون. So here Yusuf alayhi salam, they had brought something to trade. So something that they had grown over there, they brought it to trade to bring the grains that they found in, that were only to be found in Egypt. وَلَمَّا جَهَّزُهُمْ بِجِهَازِهِمْ. And then when he got there, they came on camel, and each one of them had a camel, so it was 10 camels. And كَيْلَ بَعِيرٌ means what the camel can carry on either side. So like the right and the left side. This is the kayl. قَالَ ائْتُونِي بِأَخٍ لَكُمْ مِنْ أَبِيكُمْ. He said, if you want me to give you the full thing, that also includes enough for all of you, which is the 12 people, including your brother, then you have to bring him too, with his camel. So this was kind of like a strategy used by Yusuf so that he can bring his brother Benjamin, because he suspected or he knew by wahi that they also too were not kind to him or maybe abusing him in the same way that he got abused by his older brothers. So he wanted, a way to have the brother Benjamin come to Egypt. So he said, you have to bring him back. And then also, as a further incentive, he said, put their foodstuff back in their camel. And then when they get back home, they realize that they still have it with them. And so they want to come back again. And so that was the case. He said, go back to where you're from and bring your younger brother with you. فلما رجعوا إلى أبيهم قالوا يا أبانا منع منا الكيل فأرسل معنا أخانا نكتل وإنا له لحافظون. So when they returned to their father, فلما رجعوا إلى أبيهم, Sayyidina Yaqub, they said, "Oh father, we were not permitted to take everything with us. فأرسل معنا أخانا." So send our younger brother with us. نكتل يعني نأخذ الكيل. We can get the full measure that we need for us and the family. وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. And we will protect him, nothing to worry about. Sayyidina Yaqub responds back to them. قال هل آمنكم عليه إلا كما أمنتكم على أخيه من قبل فالله خير حفظا أو حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين. حفظا في قراءة ورش. So he said, should I entrust him to you as I entrusted his brother before? He's talking about Yusuf alayhi salam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who preserves. وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. He is the most merciful of the merciful. Most merciful of the merciful. And then the next verse says that when they found their bidah, they found what they originally brought still back with them. They said, if we go back, we will further to convince Yaqub alayhi salam, نَحْفَظُ أَخَانَا وَنَزْدَادُ كَيْلَ بَعِيرٍ ذَلِكَ كَيْلٌ يَسِيرٌ. We will go back and get more, and we'll have an extra one because we brought Benjamin with us. قال لن أرسله معكم حتى تؤتوني موثقا من الله لتأتونني به إلا أن يحاط بكم فلما آتوه موثقهم قال الله على ما نقول وكيل وقال يا بني لا تدخلوا من باب واحد وادخلوا من أبواب متفرقة وما أغني عنكم من الله من شيء إن الحكم إلا لله عليه توكلت وعليه فليتوكل المتوكلون. So then Yaqub alayhi salam, he says to them, I will not send him with you حتى تأتوني موثقا من الله, till you give me the oath and a covenant that you will bring him back to me إلا أن يحاط بكم, except if you're overwhelmed and surrounded and there's nothing you could do at that point. فلما آتوه موثقهم, they all took the oath, all 10 of them. قال الله على ما نقول وكيل. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who we're going to depend upon in this particular matter. And then He instructed them, don't go enter from one gate. وَادْخُلُوا مِنْ أَبْوَابٍ مُتَفَرِّقَةٍ. Here there's kind of like a hikmah, a wisdom. And it said that He didn't want them all to go through one gate because they were all strong, big, handsome men. So as not to cause a fitna or hasad for all 10 of them entering from one particular gate. وَادْخُلُوا مِنْ أَبْوَابٍ مُتَفَرِّقَةٍ. وَادْخُلُوا مِنْ أَبْوَابٍ مُتَفَرِّقَةٍ. So in that, وَادْخُلُوا مِنْ أَبْوَابٍ مُتَفَرِّقَةٍ is like diversify, right? If you have many things, don't put them all in one place that everyone can see what's going on. Rather, split it up, diversify. وَمَا أُغْنِي عَنْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. Right? And I cannot do anything. Yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to depend upon. إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. يعني ما الحكم إلا لله. The command is completely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. But just to also give you the pieces of the story. So they return back, they bring Benjamin. Benjamin comes with them. Yusuf alayhi salam motions Benjamin to come closer and he speaks to him. And then he says, silently, he said, إِنِّي أَنَا أَخُوكَ فَلَا تَبْتَئِسْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. He tells him, I am your brother, do not be distressed about what they used to do. So he knew that was his brother Yusuf alayhi salam. And then they prepared the ayr, once again, they prepared the camels to go out with the increased foodstuffs. But this time, the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam also did a strategy. He took Suwa al-Malik, and Suwa is like a drinking vessel that was either made from silver or gold, so something expensive. and he puts it in the camel of Benjamin. Puts it in the camel of Benjamin. And so then here in verse 70, فَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ جَعَلَ السِّقَايَةَ فِي رَحْلِ أَخِيهِ ثُمَّ أَذَّنَ مُؤَذِّنٌ أَيَّتُهَا الْعِيرُ إِنَّكُمْ لَسَارِقُونَ. So when he put that in Benjamin's, then one of the people working for Yusuf alayhi salam, they said, إِنَّكُمْ لَسَارِقُونَ. Something is stolen. So they approached, they came back, they said, ماذا تفقدون? What's missing? قالوا نفقد صواع الملك ولمن جاء به حمل بعير وأنا به زعيم. So they came back and they said, what is missing? They said, we're missing this golden flask or golden vessel of the king. That's a personal property of the king, and whoever brings it back will have an extra himl, an extra camel's worth of goods. They said back to him, قالوا تالله لقد علمتم ما جئنا لنفسد في الأرض وما كنا سارقين. We didn't come here to corrupt, nor are we thieves. So then they look inside, and then they agree to go by the Sharia of Sayyidina Yaqub. The Sharia of the king at the time was not Muslim, was that if someone was caught stealing that, he would be punished and tortured. The Sharia of Yaqub is that if you're caught stealing something from someone, then you have to serve them as a slave. So they agreed to that before they started looking inside of the bags that they had for the camels. فَبَدَأَ بِأَوْعِيَتِهِمْ قَبْلَ وِعَاءِ أَخِيهِ. So they started looking in the other brothers first, so as not to let the plan be known. ثُمَّ اسْتَخْرَجَهَا مِنْ وَعَاءِ أَخِيهِ, which is Benjamin. Then he took it out of what Benjamin was carrying, and they found it. كَذَلِكَ كِدْنَا لِيُوسُفَ ما كان ليأخذ أخاه في دين الملك إلا أن يشاء الله نرفع درجات من نشاء وفوق كل ذي علم عليم. So they find it in Benjamin's carry-on, so to speak. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ما كان ليأخذ أخاه في دين الملك. He was not going to take him in the deen of the Malik, which is the deen of not Islam. And then he was punished and tortured, but they had agreed to go by the deen of Yaqub. So that means Benjamin had to stay with Yusuf alayhi salam. And that was the whole idea, that was the plan the whole time. قالوا, what did the 10 brothers say back to Yusuf alayhi salam? قالوا إن يسرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل. They said if he stole, then he has a brother of his who stole from before. Who are they talking about? They're talking about Sayyidina Yusuf. The Mufassirun are of different opinions about when did Yusuf allegedly steal something, and they have different opinions about it, which we won't go into right now, but nevertheless, all of them are false. So they made this false accusation against Yusuf alayhi salam. فَأَصَرَّهَا يُوسُفُ فِي نَفْسِهِ وَلَمْ يُبْدِهَا لَهُمْ. Right? What did he keep inside? أَصَرَّ فِي نَفْسِهِ. It means what he thought about this accusation, right? Which was very hurtful for him. وَلَمْ يُبْدِهَا لَهُمْ. Or قوله قَالَ أَنْتُمْ شَرٌّ مَكَانًا. أَنْتُمْ شَرٌّ مَكَانًا. You are much worse. Either that he kept in himself, or he might have said it out loud. Again, different interpretations. وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا تَصِفُونَ. And Allah is the one who truly knows what you have mentioned. قالوا يا أيها العزيز إن له أبا شيخا كبيرا فخذ أحدنا مكانه إن نراك من المحسنين. So then they say back to him, and they called him Al-Aziz because they don't know who he is. Sayyidina Yusuf said he has a very old father, so take one of us instead. And we see that you're from the Muhsineen. قال معاذ الله أن نأخذ إلا من وجدنا متاعنا عنده إنا إذا لظالمون. How can we take someone else who's not the worst person who did the wrongdoing? Then we would be the wrongdoers. So I'll skip ahead also. So they had an internal discussion with them. One of them, it's said to be the oldest perhaps, or one of the other brothers, said, I will not move from this area. فَلَنْ أَبْرَحَ الْأَرْض حَتَّى يَأْذَنَ لِي أَبِي أو يَحْكُمُ اللَّهُ لِي. I will keep myself here, and until Allah gives me, until my father gives me permission, or Allah sends His command, I cannot move from this place. So he was really because they had made this covenant and this thing with their father Yaqub alayhi salam, and now they don't have Benjamin to take back with them. And so they go back and they were told, just tell the truth that he was accused of stealing. And then when they go back, what was Yusuf, Yaqub, his reaction alayhi salam, verse 84, وتولى عنهم وقال يا أسف على يوسف وابيضت عيناه من الحزن فهو كظيم. So when they go back, he turns away. He hears this explanation from them. He turns away from them. He says, يا أسف على يوسف. Now remember Sayyidina Yusuf. يا أسف وابيضت عيناه. Right? And he cried so much that his eyes became white. They said this is a metaphor that he actually was partially blinded or totally blind at this particular time, though it was temporary blindness. من الحزن, from sadness, فهو كظيم, and he's still holding inside him. قالوا تالله تفتأ تذكر يوسف حتى تكون حرضا أو تكون من الهالكين. قال إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. يا بني يذهبوا فتحسسوا من يوسف وأخيه ولا تيأسوا من روح الله إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون. So Sayyidina Yaqub, he had a feeling Yusuf is there with Benjamin. So and he's still remembering him. So he tells them, first he says, إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله. I complain of my sadness and my difficulty إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى. And then he says, اذهبوا فتحسسوا من يوسف. Go back and see if you can find Yusuf and his brother. ولا تيأسوا من روح الله. And do not become desperate of روح الله or رحمة الله, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because only القوم الكافرون become desperate or despair of Allah's mercy. And then when they go back, they didn't have as much. This may have been a season later, could have been much later. They said, مسنا وأهلنا الضر وجئنا ببضاعة مزجاة. We don't have the same بضاعة to offer you. فتصدق علينا إن الله يجزي المتصدقين. So be charitable with us, because Allah loves those who are charitable. And then Yusuf alayhi salam responds back to them, قال هل علمتم ما فعلتم بيوسف وأخيه إذ أنتم جاهلون. He said, did you know what you did with Yusuf and his brother? And you were jahilun, you were in that state of jahiliyyah. Then they realize who they're talking to. قالوا أأنك لأنت يوسف. It's as if you are Yusuf. قال أنا يوسف وهذا أخي قد من الله علينا إنه من يتقي ويصبر فإن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين. He said, I am Yusuf and this is my brother, Benjamin. قد من الله علينا. Allah has given us much to be grateful for. إنه من يتقي ويصبر, who has taqwa and sabr, patience, فإن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين. Allah will never lose or never give the reward to the muhsineen. قالوا تالله لقد آثرك الله علينا وإن كنا لخاطئين. They said, Allah has preferred you over us and we have made a big mistake. قال لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين. لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. There is no blame upon you today. يغفر الله لكم. Allah will forgive all of you. وهو أرحم الراحمين. And He is the most merciful of the merciful. This is the same thing that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said when he entered Mecca, on the conquest of Mecca, and then they said to him as they were gathered at the Kaaba, because he said anyone who goes to the house of Abu Sufyan will be safe, and anyone who goes to the Kaaba will be safe. Then he reaches the Kaaba and many of the mushrikeen are there, and they said, ماذا أنت فاعل بنا? What will you do with us? And then in the riwayah it says, أقول لكم كما قال الكريم ابن الكريم ابن الكريم ابن الكريم. I will say the same thing to you as the kind and generous, the son of the kind and generous, the son of kind and generous, son of kind and generous said to his brothers, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. There's no blame upon you. أنتم الطلقاء. You can go as you please. So at this point, towards the end of the surah, just to summarize, they go back to their father and he gives them his shirt. Is it the same shirt that was in with the wolf, or is it the same shirt that actually was owned by Ibrahim alayhi salam, then passed down? Riwayat, Allahu a'lam, but a shirt. And then as soon as they left, وَلَمَّا فَصَلَتِ الْعِيرُ قَالَ أَبُوهُمْ إِنِّي لَأَجِدُ رِيحَ يُوسُفَ. As soon as they left, he had the sense that Yusuf alayhi salam was alive and he was there. And then the people around him said, قَالَ اللَّهِ إِنَّكَ لَفِي ضَلَالِكَ الْقَدِيمِ. How could he be? This is many years later. فَلَمَّا أَنْ جَاءَ الْبَشِيرُ أَلْقَاهُ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. And then when they came and he took the shirt, he put it on his face, فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. Then his vision was restored. قَالَ أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكُمْ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Have I not told you that I know from Allah what you do not know? قَالُوا يَا أَبَانَ اسْتَغْفِرْ لَنَا ذُنُوبَنَا إِنَّا كُنَّا خَاطِئِينَ. They said, "Oh Father, seek forgiveness on our behalf. We have made a terrible mistake." قَالَ سَوْفَ أَسْتَغْفِرُ لَكُمْ رَبِّي إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. He said, "I will seek forgiveness on your behalf. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. فَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا عَلَى يُوسُفَ آوَى إِلَيْهِ أَبَوَيْهِ وَقَالَ ادْخُلُوا مِصْرَ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ آمِنِينَ." And then they all come back. So all the other 10, because who stayed? One of the older brothers, and Benjamin and Yusuf. So the 10 come, and the mother and father of Yusuf alayhi salam. So that's 12. And then when they came, he said, "Udkhulu Misr in sha'Allah aminin." Enter into Egypt, aminin, safe and peaceful. وَرَفَعَ أَبَوَيْهِ عَلَى الْعَرْشِ وَخَرُّوا لَهُ سُجَّدًا. And he raised them to the, like the manassa or the platform of the king. And then they went down into sujood as a tahiyya, as a greeting. وقال يا أبت هذا تأويل رؤياي من قبل قد جعلها ربي حقا وقد أحسن بي إذ أخرجني من السجن وجاء بكم من البدو من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان بيني وبين إخوتي إن ربي لطيف لما يشاء إنه هو العليم الحكيم ربي قد آتيتني من الملك وعلمتني من تأويل الأحاديث فاطر السماوات والأرض أنت ولي في الدنيا والآخرة توفني مسلما وألحقني بالصالحين. And then the end of the story, رفع أبويه على العرش. Then he went in sujood. He said to his father, يا أبتي هذا تأويل رؤياي من قبل قد جعلها ربي حقا. In the very beginning of the surah, when I saw the 12 planets, the 10 planets and the sun and the moon in prostration to me, this is the ta'wil, the interpretation of my dream. Here it has come to pass. قد جعلها ربي حقا. Allah has made it true. وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ بِي. And He has been so merciful and good to me. إِذْ أَخْرَجْنِي مِنَ السِّجْنِ. He took me out of the sijin, out of the prison. وَجَاءَ بِكُم مِّنَ الْبَدْوِ. And you came all the way from the countryside, on the other side of the Red Sea. مِن بَعْدِ أَن نَزَغَ الشَّيْطَانُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِ إِخْوَتِي. After the shaitan got between me and my brothers. إِنَّ رَبِّي لَطِيفٌ لِمَا يَشَاءُ. My Lord is latif in the way that He wants to be. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْعَلِيمُ الْحَكِيمُ. Rabbi, he's speaking to Allah now. Rabbi and then he goes to the second person. Rabbi قد آتيتني من الملك. You gave me from this kingdom. وعلمتني من تأويل الأحاديث. And you taught me the interpretation of dreams. فاطر السماوات والأرض. The originator of the heavens and the earth. أنت ولي في الدنيا والآخرة. You are my wali, my guardian, my protector في الدنيا والآخرة. توفني مسلما والحقني بالصالحين. Let me die as a Muslim, a dua, and let me be amongst the Salihin, the most righteous. ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ نُوحِيهِ إِلَيْكَ. Now speaking back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he spoke to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the beginning of the surah. Now at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ نُوحِيهِ إِلَيْكَ. This is from the news of the ghaib that we're telling you would have not known before. وَمَا كُنْتَ لَدَيْهِمْ إِذْ أَجْمَعُوا أَمْرَهُمْ وَهُمْ يَمْكُرُونَ. And you're not amongst them when they plotted, the brothers. وَمَا أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. And most people, no matter how hard you try, will not be believers, will not become believers. وَمَا تَسْأَلُهُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And it's not for you to get anything back from them, but it's a dhikr, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we'll just skip to قوله ta'ala, instruction to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين. Say, this is my way, أدعو إلى الله. I invite to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني. Myself and those who follow me. وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين. And glory to Allah, I am not from the mushrikeen. والله تعالى أعلى وأعلم. بارك الله فيكم وزادكم تقى وزادكم قربة وقربا إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى، وجعلنا من الفائزين الناجحين من عتقاء هذا الشهر الكريم، إنه ولي ذلك والقادر عليه، ويرفع عن إخواننا في كل مكان في فلسطين وفي غزة وفي رفح وسائر بلدان المسلمين المشقات والنزعات والفتن ما ظهر منه وبطن. وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.